Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavadinda ki, Gaur Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This evening we'll get really close to completing Canto 10, Chapter 12, which is one way of describing it. It's a description of Krishna's killing of Aghasura. And we're entering the final section. The first section of the chapter is the cowherd boys and their activities. There's so many nice things to appreciate about how the Bhagavatam is structured, and our Acharya is commenting. Part of the commentary gives a description of different categories of friends, because it's one of the primary rasas is friendship. We hear about those who are mitras, just like today for the Potomac Temple class, there was some discussion about Vishva Mitra. Mitra means friend. He's the friend of the universe, Vishva Mitra. So Mitra is a type of friend. Surit is a certain type of friend. There's different types of friends. The cowherd boys fall in the category of sakhas. And sakhas means they just play. Friendship with Krishna in that category is they just play. And they play and they play and they play. So there's the first part is a description of their activities together, how they play together with Krishna. And that section ends with Shukadeva Goswami just becoming ecstatic, spontaneously interrupts the narration of the activities and just goes, wow, how fortunate are these cowherd boys. Krita, punya, punja, how many pious activities have they undergone to come to this position where, in comparison to the Gyanis who realize Krishna as Brahmasuk, the happiness of Brahman, where the materialists just see him as an ordinary person, where the Dasya Bhaktas, they worship him as the Supreme Lord. These boys are playing with him all day long. The meditators who for lifetimes with severe austerities and penances fix their mind upon the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, they cannot even touch a particle of dust from the feet that they're meditating upon, and the cowherd boys, they're playing with him. And all the associates of Vrindavan, they're of Nanda Maharaj and everybody, they're companions of Krishna. How fortunate. That section ends. The next section begins with, I find it interesting, curious. It speaks, Sukadeva Goswami is narrating this, by his Yogamaya potency, Krishna summons Aghasura. It's time for a pastime. Our Acharya sometimes described like this: the cowherd boys are so absorbed in their activities together that it becomes necessary for Krishna around 11 o'clock for a demon to appear. Krishna kills the demon, and it's time for lunch. After lunch, they sometimes take a little nap, and off they go. And then around 4 o'clock, another demon, because they were otherwise they wouldn't come home. So a demon comes, on time. So we hear of the major demons that Krishna killed, but it's a daily affair. So Aghasura comes, the cowherd boys see this giant 8-mile-long serpent lying on the path that they regularly walk, and they've never seen him here before. And what's this? Maybe that, maybe the other thing. And they finally conclude, well, even if it is a giant serpent wants to kill us, Krishna has always protected us, so we're curious. What's inside there? Let's go. Because they're just in this playful mood. So you're going to go and play inside the mouth of this giant, whatever it is, cave, something. And the calves, because the boys are 5 years old at the time of this pastime, they just follow the cowherd boys. Their tails raised, and the boys are raising their arms and making noise and laughing and frolicking, and the calves go right after them. And Aghasura doesn't close his mouth. It's Python. Doesn't close his mouth because he wants to kill Krishna. And then, the pastime. An important part of the pastime is Krishna seeing the cowherd boys enter the mouth of Aghasura. They want to stop him. He wants to stop them. But he doesn't. Which is philosophically surprising. Commentary says his nature is he doesn't have to do anything. He just has to desire something. Satya Sankalpa Shakti. Satya Sankalpa Shakti. He just desires something, and it happens. He doesn't even have to call his potencies to take care of it. He just desires something, and it happens. His potencies take care of it. They're at his service, but it doesn't happen. They enter so he becomes bewildered. Now, all of that is the influence of the Yogamaya potency, acting according to his will. We had this little question-answer session about what's the function of Yogamaya. And the Yogamaya function is upon us, or the pure devotees, is to forget who Krishna is so they can enter into more confidential relationships with him. And so when it acts upon Krishna, it's on Krishna's indication to cover him so he forgets who he is. But he can't forget who he is because he's the Supreme Lord. It's a triple mystery. There's commentary that says he never forgets who he is. And nonetheless, Yogamaya acts in such a way that at least it seems if he forgets. And in that moment, which is very quickly, Yogamaya withdraws and he knows exactly what to do. Aghasura does a little devotional service. Aghasura is making an arrangement to reunite Krishna with the cowherd boys and the cowherd boys with Krishna. So Krishna enters the mouth. This is also important. He places his lotus feet in the mouth of this vile serpent, but he doesn't cringe. He just walks into the mouth of the serpent because that's the pastime. Then makes himself big, his mystic power, The serpent's body expands and eventually he suffocates. The soul leaves, because it doesn't have any other opening, it leaves through the Brahmarandra, and the head of the serpent hovers in the air until Krishna exits the mouth and then merges in the body of Krishna. That's the end of that section. The next section is Shukadeva Goswami is narrating all of this. So he narrates to Maharaj Parikshit how astonished everybody was. The demigods showered flowers and played kettle drums and blew their conch shells and, victory. Krishna killed Aghasura, because they were intimidated by Aghasura. He was a terrible demon. And then comes the next section, or within that same section, the mystery of how someone so bad, so vile, so cruel can get liberation. And so there's a number of verses on if you're a demon, what's your eligibility for getting liberation? And there's nice discussion by Shukadeva Goswami, and then volumes of discussion by our acharyas on the stage of liberation for anyone. Rather than reviewing all that, now this enters the final section. The final section, we're going to be discussing 2 verses. Much to our surprise, because in the whole of the 10th canto, we don't hear so much about Sutta, who's speaking to Shaunaka Rishi and the sages in Naimisharanya, but there's one verse where Sutta speaks. He surfaces again. And then the next verse is Maharaj Parikshit saying, the language that you used shows a time gap. The cowherd boys went back home 1 year later and described what happened, because this was a pattern, after the killing of a demon. But they hadn't had lunch yet. But at the end of the day, they went back and told what happened that day. So he hears very carefully that a whole year passed, but they went back and told the story to everybody as if it happened the same day. So could you explain? It's a contradiction, right? So could you explain? And so we're going to hear, you have to listen very carefully. Those of you that like to take notes, it's good to take notes, because it's going to get into very specifics of the sequence of Krishna's childhood pastimes. The sequence of childhood pastimes of Krishna. So it's Canto 10, 12, 39, and 40. Is that right? No, that's wrong. We finished 39. So it's text 40. Pardon me. There we go. 40 and 41. 10, 12, 40, and 41. So text 40 is, here's Sutta Goswami spoke to the assembled sages at Naimisharanya. O learned saints, the childhood pastimes of Sri Krishna are very wonderful. Maharaj Parikshit, after hearing about those pastimes of Krishna, who had saved him in the womb of his mother, became steady in his mind, and again inquired from Shukadeva Goswami to hear about those pious activities. There's no BBT purport. In other words, Prabhupada didn't write something. I'm going to read a few of our acharyas. Jiva Goswami comments, suddenly Sutta speaks. Out of great bliss, he praises Shukadeva and Parikshit. Parikshit's heart was afflicted, near Grahita, by the appearance of prema in separation from the Lord. Parikshit asks to hear more because the topics are most auspicious, punyam. Those topics were the only medicine for Shukadeva's suffering. Vishwanath Chakravarti writes, Parikshit, who was given to Uttara, or Yudhisthira, this is now reading the Sanskrit, Yadava Deva Datta. Now, Parikshit was Yadava Deva Datta, given to Uttara or Yudhisthira by Krishna. Hearing of the wonderful pastimes of he who gives himself to his devotees, Sva Ratuhu, whose heart was controlled by hearing those pastimes, that's Parikshit, Yad Nigrahita Cheta. Again, Parikshit began to ask questions to Shukadeva. And here's Sanatana Goswami's commentary. As Shukadeva was speaking, Ittam, out of great enthusiasm, Parikshit began to inquire. Parikshit had been given by the Lord, Yadava Deva, to the Pandavas, after being protected from the Brahmastra. Yadava Deva indicates that he was related to the Pandavas. Parikshit inquired from Shukadeva, the son of Vyasa, who knew the meaning of the Vedas, after hearing the most astonishing Vichkitra pastimes, the most astonishing pastimes, because some details were unclear. After hearing, he began to consider Parikshit. Parikshit's heart was pained with longing. Now this is a sanchari bhav. We've been discussing this from the Aghasura chapter. Sanchari bhav is an ecstasy that rises and stays for some time. Some ecstasies, in the ocean of ecstasy, in prema rasa, they rise and they fall, and they rise and they fall, and they mix with other waves of ecstasy and so forth. This particular one, near grahita, or longing, he felt painful. No, the painful was feeling separation from Krishna. Because he's a pure devotee, he's attached to Krishna. When he grew up, he heard all the time about his grandparents and his grandparents' association with Krishna, their activities with Krishna, their connection with Krishna. So he's very accustomed to hearing Krishna Katha. Now he's hearing this wonderful Krishna's childhood pastimes from Shukadeva Goswami, and the pain in his heart is the pain of longing to be connected with Krishna in a personal way, because that didn't happen. He's the posthumous child, and when he grew up, Krishna was still present for some time, but he had the tiny association with Krishna directly. So, Parikshit's heart was pained with near grahita, or longing, by the appearance of special prema because of hearing the pastimes. The answers to his questions would be most auspicious, punyam, being the medicine for his distress. Hearing more relieves that longing. Of course, that leaves more longing. Okay, Jiva Goswami writes, Maharaj Parikshit, after hearing about those remarkable pastimes of Krishna, who had saved him in the womb of his mother, delivered to the Pandavas, with heart afflicted by separation, again inquired from Shukadeva Goswami about the auspicious topics. That's this text 40. His mind was completely under the control, grihita cheta, of Krishna, by hearing the pastimes of Krishna. Maharaj Parikshit became intently attracted to hearing the glories of Lord Krishna. This is described in this verse, which is Sri Sutta Goswami said, O learned saints, the childhood pastimes of Sri Krishna are very wonderful. Maharaj Parikshit, after hearing about those pastimes of Krishna, who had saved him in the womb of his mother, became steady in his mind and again inquired from Shukadeva Goswami to hear about those pious activities. Okay, it's just summarizing this text 40 up through 45, so there's a group of 5 verses in a row. Summarized, Jiva Goswami writes in Krishna Sandarbha, with unfaltering, fresh interest, Maharaj Parikshit constantly meditated upon Lord Krishna, the unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is full of all opulences. This may be seen in the following words. So we saw one of them. Now here's the next one. Here's what Maharaj Parikshit says. Shri Raja Uvacha. O great sage, how could things done in the past have been described as being done at the present? Lord Krishna performed this pastime of killing Aghasura during his Komara age. Komara age ends with 5. How then, during his Poganda age, starts with 6, could the boys have described this incident as having happened recently? This question leads into the whole next chapter. That 1 year that passed after the Brahma Vimohan Leela and Krishna had manifested himself as calves and cowherd boys, what happened in Braja with the mothers and the cows, who were the mothers of those calves. 1 year. So this question opens the door for the next chapter. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, quote, how can past events appear as if they happened very recently? How can Krishna make the pastimes which happened when the boys were in their Kumara age, 5 years old, appear to have happened later when they were 6 years old? Jiva Goswami writes, how could the activities which occurred in the past be seen in the present time? How could the boys say that when Krishna did his Kumara, what Krishna did in his Kumara period was done in his Bokanda period? Knowing the activities took place in the Kumara period, how could they say otherwise? How could this happen? And Sanatana Goswami is very short. How could activities which occurred in the past be seen in the present time? This is explained. It seemed impossible. You alone know it. O direct form of the Vedas, Shukadev. So now we're going to go to Canto 10, Chapter 14, Text 61. 10:14:61. This is in Brahma's prayers section. It's jumping ahead 2 chapters. And in the commentary that follows this, so that's commentary touching on this evening's verse, referred to in that section 2 chapters later. And it's going to go through the sequence of Krishna's childhood pastimes. At this age he did these things, in those age he did those things, and so forth. In this way, the boys spent their childhood in the land of Vrindavan playing hide-and-go-seek, building play bridges, jumping about like monkeys, and engaging in many other such games. Commentary. King Parikshit had asked the question, Brahman kalatara kritam tat kalinam katam bhavet. O great sage, how could things done in the past have been described as being done in the present? Krishna performed the pastime of killing Aghasura during his Kumara age. That's what text 41 says. How then, during his Poganda age, that's beginning from the 5th year, so up to the end of the 4th year is Kumara, and at the 5th year, Poganda. How could they have been described as having happened recently? In these chapters, that question has been answered. Now Shukadeva Goswami continues his service of narrating Krishna's pastimes. Quote, Krishna and Balaram spent their childhood secretly, Jahatu, in Braja, playing hide and seek, Nila Yanai, and enacting the pastimes of other incarnations, such as the building of the bridge to travel, journeying to Lanka, and churning the milk ocean. Now it's going ahead to Canto 10, Chapter 45. Chapter 45 of Canto 10 is Krishna has entered Mathura, he's killed Kamsa, he's come into the prison house to release Vasudeva and Devaki, and now Krishna is saying to his father, Vasudeva, dear father, because of us, your 2 sons, you and Mother Devaki always remained in anxiety and could never enjoy our childhood, boyhood, or youth. So those Bala, Komara, and Poganda. He addressed his father first, since he is more prominent. He addresses him as father to arouse within him paternal affection, since Vasudeva did not have strong affection like Nanda, because he had knowledge of Krishna as the Lord. That is to say, knowledge of the opulence of the Supreme Lord diminishes intimacy. So outside of Vrindavan, they have awareness of his divinity, and the intimacy is not the same as in Vrindavan, or say it in verse, because the intimacy mood in Vrindavan is so strong, they don't look at his divinity. Madhurya eclipses Aishvarya. That's Vrindavan. In saying that they could not enjoy his Kaishora period, Krishna means that they, his parents, could not enjoy his full Kaishora period, but only part, because he's still in his Kaishora period, the end. He's still 5. He's still, at this age, we'll hear the breakdown of chronology. He does not mean to say that he has now passed the Kaishor period, since it is said, Kaishoran Napa Yavanao. They attained Kaishor period, but did not yet enter Yovana period. That is to say, we're not used to these terminologies, but in Vedic culture, it's important. Different passing of years and identified by certain stages, because commonly there's psychological and physiological development of a child. It's in different stages, different requirements, different tendencies, different needs. So this is Jiva Goswami asserting they had just begun their Kaishor period. One should consider the order of their age. According to the people of Braja, Krishna lifted Govardhan when he was, how old? 7. And Jiva Goswami refers to the verse where they speak about it. This is the resident of Vrindavan, the chapter just after Krishna put Govardhan Hill back. And they're talking about, who is he? So they say, on the one hand, this boy is only 7 years old. And on the other hand, we see that he has lifted the great hill Govardhan. Therefore, O King of Braja, a doubt about your son has arisen within us. So, he's 7 when he lifted Govardhan Hill, according to the Brijbasis. He held up the lunar mountain on the third, he held up the mountain on the 3rd lunar day during the waxing moon of the Kartik month. Govardhan Lila happens during the Kartik month. And it begins on the 3rd lunar day of the waxing moon. He completed the 7th year on the 8th lunar day of the Gauna Bhadra month. That's the month that follows. So Balaram appears in the Bhadra month. So he, out of affection, the people stated that he was 7 years old, when actually he was 7 years, 2 months, and 10 days old. So we say 7 years. It's convenient. It's 2 years, 7 years, 2 months, 10 days old. Taking that date as a marker, one should then calculate the age at which he performed the previous pastimes. He goes backward and then he goes forward from that marker. One should also consider the following statements and the example of quick development seen in a prince. What that is reference to, that sometimes it is seen that the son of a king would develop prematurely. He would start to do things that other little children don't do, just he's precocious, he's got that capacity. He refers to Canto 10, Chapter 8. O King Parikshit, within a very short time, both Balaram and Krishna began to walk very easily in Gokula on their legs, by their own strength, without the need to crawl. So he did that before little children normally walk. They're still crawling. Therefore, it was not impossible that Krishna lifted Govardhan when a little over 7 years old, since he was, moreover, the Supreme Lord. He killed Trinavarta when he was 1 year old. Damodar pastime took place at the beginning of his 3rd year. So Putana, Trinavarta, the Damodar Lila, beginning of the 3rd year, during Kartik month. Some days after that, they went from Gokula to Vrindavan. Correct? After the Damodar pastime, the Arjuna trees fell over, and the elders got together and said, too many demons, we should take these children to a safe place. And the cows, and they need fresh pasture and ground and so forth. So a little after his third year began, that's when the shift took place. They went to Vrindavan. Some days after that, they went from Gokula to Vrindavan. After 2 or 3 months, Krishna began herding calves. So he began herding calves when he was 3 plus. While herding the calves, he killed Vatsasura, Bakasura, and Vyomasura. When the 3rd year was complete, he entered his 4th year. In the autumn season, Brahma stole the calves and cowherd boys. So now, he's in his 4th year. He hasn't reached his 5th year yet. So this Brahma Vimohan Lila and this Aghasura happened before that, is between 4 and 5. 4 plus, but not yet 5. He entered the Poganda period at that time. However, it is said, very important, that's our verse for this evening. O great sage, Rikshit to Shukadev, how could things done in the past have been described as being done at present? Krishna performed this pastime of killing Aghasura during his Kumara age. How then, during his Poganda age, could the boys have described this incident as having happened recently? So there's a year that's missing. That's what's being alluded to. He's going about this like Sherlock Holmes, kind of deductively. Thus, because of the theft, there was a delay in Poganda manifesting. Poganda age appeared when Krishna was 5. He began herding the cows on the 8th lunar day of the waxing moon in Kartik month. In the summer of that 5th year, he subdued Kaliya. In his 6th year, he had fun herding the cows. In the beginning of the 7th year, he entered Kaishur period. He was, he matured early. Like he began to walk before most children walked. He became a Kaishura personality even before other children do. He was otherwise, by normal child's life, he's still Poganda, but he became Kaishura, according to Jiva Goswami. At that time, he killed Danika on going to the forest of ripe tal fruits. That evening, the gopis showed the first signs of love for him. Chapter 15, Canto 5 says, with their bee-like eyes, the women of Vrindavan drank the honey of the beautiful face of Mukunda, and thus they gave up the distress they had felt during the day because of separation from him. The young Vrindavan ladies cast sidelong glances at the Lord, glances filled with bashfulness, laughter, and submission, and Krishna completely accepted these glances as a proper offering of respect, entered the cowherd village. Thus, the pastimes of subduing Kaliya and the killing of Danika are narrated out of order. That's Jiva Goswami's. They're not always chronological. There's some other ones that are, Vyomasura's being killed is also not chronological. In the summer of the 7th year, Pralamba was killed. During the Ashvina month of his 8th year, he played the flute. During Kartik month, he lifted Govardhan. So Jiva Goswami says, thus, when the inhabitants exclaimed that he was only 7 years old, he was 8 years old. And to help support that conclusion, he refers to Uddhava, Canto 3, Chapter 2, saying, his father, afraid of Kamsa, brought him to Braja, and for 11 years he lived there with Balaram, like a colored flame. So he's going now further along. Before he went backwards from that marker of the lifting of Govardhan Hill, he's just going through statements from the Bhagavatam and how to understand the chronology of everything. At the beginning of the 8th year, on the 11th day of Kartik, waxing moon, he was bathed and given the name Govinda. So now he's again asserting the Govardhan Leela took place when he was 8 years old. And when did that bathing by Surabhi take place? The 8th day of the waxing moon, given the name Govinda. On the 12th day, that's 4 days later, he went to Varuna's kingdom. 12th day of the waxing moon in the month of Kartik, which happened, shortly after Govardhan Leela. On the full moon day, he immersed the inhabitants in the Brahmahrida. So what that refers to is, after bringing his father, Nanda, back from the abode of Varuna, the elders of Braja, because it was, remember, he was arrested for having violated, at least it was thought, the Ekadasi, breaking the Ekadasi fast on the Dwadasi day. That's the marker, the Dwadasi day. That's 12 days after the waxing moon begins, the full moon. So on that day, that evening, that's when Krishna showed to the residents of Vrindavan the spiritual world. Remember that pastime? Some of you know, some of you don't know. When they came back, Nanda said, wow, you know what happened? And he told what happened. And so the elders were doing it again. Who is he? And then they started saying, well, maybe he is the personality of God. And if he is, it would be really merciful if he would show us his eternal abode. And they're already there. But, they don't understand that they're there. So they want to see his eternal abode. So they didn't say anything to Krishna, but omniscient Krishna knows their hearts. And so he decided, I'll show them. So he took them to the same place that Aghasura saw what Aghasura saw when taking Krishna and Balaram to Mathura on his chariot. Went to the same place called Brahmahrida. Hrada means lake, and the lake of Brahman. He took them there, he immersed them, he lifted them out, and then they saw Goloka, Krishna Loka. They saw the spiritual world right there, because that's what they wanted. Krishna is fulfilling their desire. And what they saw was astonishing. They saw Krishna there. They saw themselves there. And they saw the personified Vedas offering prayers to Krishna. And they went, wow, that's the spiritual world, huh? And then the curtain of Yogamaya covered them. They forgot everything. So when did that take place? It's being narrated here. On the full moon day. So the Dwadasi, Trayodasi, Chaturdasi, full moon day. This is when Krishna took them to that place. During the winter season, he stole the gopis' clothing, since this is mentioned in Varaha Purana. In the summer of his 8th year, he gave mercy to the wives of the Brahmanas. In his 9th year, he performed the rasa dance. He went to Ambika Vana during Shivaratri on the 14th lunar day. He killed Shankachuda in the Palgun month. He's still in his 9th year. In his 10th year, he performed pastimes as he pleased. He killed Arishta on the full moon of the Chaitya month when he was 11. Keshi on the 12th lunar day of the Gona Palgun on the 14th day. So he's 11 years and like 8 months. He killed Kamsa. He was not actually 12 years old at that time, but 11, as mentioned by Uddhava, which, that's that verse by Uddhava again. Krishna's father, afraid of Kamsa, brought him to Braja, and for 11 years he lived there with Balaram like a covered flame. So that's a marker. Then you count back. So he lived in Braja for 11 years. And so 3 years, 2 months this place, 3 years, 2 months that place, and the rest of the time in Nandagram. And then 11 years, 8 months. He wasn't yet 12 years. Is when he was taken from Vrindavan. That's how long he stayed in Vrindavan before he went to kill Kamsa. At the end of his 9th year, then it goes out to this nomenclature. There's years and then the terms that describe. At the end of his 9th year, he entered full Kaishora period. He does not age beyond this period. And to assert that or to support that, he refers to something that happens in Dwarka. And what happened in Dwarka is Pradumna, Krishna's first son of Rukmini and Krishna, is Pradumna. He entered into the palace of Krishna. But everyone thought that Pradumna was Krishna. The women became bashful and hid themselves here and there. So on this basis, Jiva Goswami says Krishna didn't appear to be older than 12 years old, even in Dwarka. Now, commonly we hear that Krishna appeared to be 16. This is discussed elsewhere by Jiva Goswami, Krishna's age. And there's not the kind of detail that Jiva Goswami goes into here. I've not come across anything quite like it from our acharyas of doing this chronology the way that he's done it, because there are certain very clear benchmarks of this time and that time, and counting backwards and counting forwards, and but we commonly hear that Krishna left Vrindavan. Here's some further detail. Once he goes to Mathura, then he's reunited with Vasudeva and Devaki, and the first thing that's narrated is Ugrasena is reinstalled as the king on the throne, and the very next thing is Krishna gets his Upanayanam, and that there's lots of commentaries surrounding that one, because Upanayana for a Vaishya boy and Upanayana for a Kshatriya boy happened at different times. But he had not yet received mantra. So the person who performed his mantra diksha was Gargamuni. And then there's a lot of discussion surrounding that about what was his age when that happened. And it was appropriate age. He was a Kshatriya son of Vasudeva and Devaki, and therefore it was appropriate that he receive his mantra at 12, and then from that point he went to school, Sandipani Muni school, etc. But he was 12 when he entered when he received his mantra. It was the end of his 11th year, the beginning of his 12th year. So then comes these, Kaishora and Poganda and Yovana terminologies. And what we're hearing from Jiva Goswami is it's a little bit of a blur because Krishna matured early. So what the child development was a little different for Krishna than an ordinary child. And those terminologies apply to child development periods and their requirements and their abilities and their talking and their walking and their thising and thating. So he broke the rules, the usual child development standards. And he manifested, just like he began herding the calves when he was 3 years old. Now think of a little boy that's 3 years old herding calves. There's a really nice story about it. When the story goes like this. Krishna loves the cows. And the cows love Krishna. I mean, all living entities love Krishna and Vraja, but Krishna has special affection for the cows. So he and Balaram together went with Nanda when he went out to take care of the cows. And sometimes Krishna would go with Balaram and they would take care of a few cows. And he started when he went back, he requested Mother Jasoda, he wanted to take out the cows himself. And Mother Jasoda said, Gopal, the cows are so big and you're so small. Go ask your father. So he asked his father. And his father couldn't say no. He couldn't say yes. So finally his father agreed that you can take care of the calves. So this is described here, but the detail is when he was a little over 3 years, about 4 months or 5 months. That's when he started taking care of calves. So they had a big festival. I mean, gotta have a festival, right? Family members engaged in the family business, so I have a big festival. And the big festival, everybody gathered and brought gifts for Krishna. They gave him his first flute, they gave him a buffalo horn, they gave him a stick, they gave him some ropes, they gave him this and that for his occupation of taking care of the calves. And the description goes that Mother Jasoda gave Krishna 2 things. He gave him a pair of shoes because she didn't want him to go out into the forest barefoot with stones and sharp things, and an umbrella because sometimes the sun is hot. So Krishna refused. He said, I'm not going to wear these shoes unless you make shoes for every one of the calves of Nanda Maharaj. Because I can't wear shoes if the cows don't have shoes, or the calves. And Mother Jasoda tried to reason with him, but nature made the arrangement. They already have shoes. See? So you should wear these shoes. And he refused. And as far as an umbrella, they don't need an umbrella. Their body is designed so that they don't require that. He refused. He didn't take the shoes and didn't take the umbrella. He went barefoot. And therefore the marks of his feet on the soft sand of Vrindavan marked the imprints of his feet. And that's what Aghasura saw when Aghasura came. Of course, it was much later. So we're getting a picture of the sequence of events, which is specifically to this verse. It's Shukadev, Maharaj Parikshit wanting to know how is it that when an event that took place 1 year earlier is being described by the cowherd boys when they go back to Vrindavan and say, guess what happened today? What's that? Krishna did this. But the event happened 1 year before. So can you please explain? And that carries into the next chapter. Any discussion or comments? Those of you that are online, if you have some questions, you can send them to the chat box. And I'm being reminded that I need to look at this camera more than the people in the room, because the people that are on the other side of the camera are feeling left out. Got some feedback about that. So, yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You talked about Yogamaya,
Yeah.
how in the spiritual world, because of Yogamaya, all the devotees there, the Gopas, Gopis, they don't know that Krishna is God. But does Krishna himself know that he is God?
Oh,
Or
yes.
Yogamaya doesn't cover him then?
Sometimes, when Krishna so desires, Yogamaya arranges, according to Krishna's desire, to, as a pastime, lapse into forgetfulness of his identity. This is, it's a lovely topic that our acharyas like to discuss. Not at any point in time is he anything other than all-knowing,
Okay.
including who he is. No amnesia, no forgetfulness. But in the ecstasy of Yogamaya, he doesn't act as if he is remembering who he is, although he's in full knowledge of who he is. It's a subtle, well, wait a minute, it's either this or that kind of thing. But he's all-knowing always.
Okay. Right. That the Ishopanishad says that, but I was just curious.
It's a particular dramatic effect of Yogamaya. So he's not acting in that full awareness, and there's this. It's an ecstasy for him. It's a pause where he forgets his divinity, apparently, for his happiness.
Wow.
A certain happiness. Okay.
Thank you.
Something else?
One more question,
Sure.
please. So, actually, I wrote that one down because I heard in a lecture a few days ago that you had mentioned that there's a difference in the kind of liberation that when Krishna personally kills an asura or a demon like Kamsa or Aghasura versus Lord Nrsingadev perhaps killing
Yes.
Hiranyakashipu. They're both demons. What's a liberation that the one who is personally killed by Krishna versus Hiranyakashipu getting?
The difference is wiping the slate clean of sins and the consequence of sins. That kind of liberation, they're liberated from the responsibility, the karmic responsibility of their sins. That's made clean when Nrsingadev or Ram kill Hiranyakashipu or Ravana. That kind of liberation, neutrality liberation.
Okay.
What's not clear is where they go. They have to go somewhere. The soul goes somewhere. It doesn't say where. I've asked scholars. There's no indication from scripture or our acharyas or anything saying where they went. They went somewhere. But they didn't go to Brahma, or the Brahma Jyoti, and then come. That's not indicated at all. They went somewhere. Limbo or something. Then took birth again. And the liberation when Krishna kills is not only the slate is made neutral, but they either commonly enter the Brahmajyoti, or even more specifically, this is from our acharyas, referring to when the sons of the Brahmana in Dwarka were taken away, and he was criticizing Ugrasena, what kind of king are you? And Krishna is supposed to be the protector, and a
Right.
Brahmana's sons, he can't even have his own. They were born alive, they weren't born dead, but then as soon as they were born, they disappeared. So Krishna took Arjuna to Mahavishnu. You know that story, right?
No.
No? It's in Krishna book. It's toward the very end of Canto 10. You can read about it later.
Okay.
Chapter 89 or something like that. And so it's really fantastic. Krishna summons his chariot. Here comes the chariot. Krishna and Arjuna get on the chariot, and off they go, describing Vedic cosmology. They pass different planetary systems. They enter into the coverings of the universe. They get on the other side of the coverings of the universe, where the universes are floating in the causal ocean, right? So they pass through the causal ocean, and the other shore of the causal ocean is the Brahma Jyoti. They have to put on their sunglasses. It's so bright. And then they go to the abode of Mahavishnu, which is in the causal ocean. And Mahavishnu greets them and says, I know that you've appeared in this earthly realm for the purpose of killing the demons that are there. And since I couldn't get to see you, I made the arrangement for the sons of the Brahmana. I'm the one that took them. Sure, I'll be glad to give them. I knew that you'd come because you're omniscient. So here they are. And in the future, any of the further demons that you kill, send them to me, and they can enter into the effulgence of my abode. So there's some options.
So that's the Brahma Jyoti then.
That's the Brahma Jyoti of Mahavishnu, but there's also many Jyotis in that spiritual realm. Many Jyotis, so much light. So that's one. I'm just repeating what our acharyas say in response to your question. Where do they go? They go to the Brahma Jyoti, and it may be that Brahma Jyoti, may be another portion of the Brahma Jyoti, but that's what Mahavishnu says to Krishna and Arjuna. As you kill them, send them my way. I'll give them a place in my Brahma Jyoti. And then some from there, it doesn't give the technology and doesn't give the frequency other than rarely, like what happened with Aghasura. From the Brahma Jyoti, they're elevated to Vaikuntha. And they achieve Rupya, form like the Lord.
For being demons.
Well, not for being demons. It's
but having been killed by Krishna.
Yes. Wow. And there's some other detail. Listen to the detail. You ask a question, you got to get some details.
Sure.
Okay. Sure. They had become pure. The Aghasura, for example, had become purified by the touch of Krishna's foot in his mouth. Same as happened to his brother Baka. He became purified by the touch of Krishna in his Baka mouth. And Baka also achieved Rupya Mukti. He achieved the Vaikuntha realm because there was some service that he did. And there was some service that Prabhupada explains this. You go back in this chapter 12, and Prabhupada's very clear that he attained Rupya Mukti, Aghasura. So where do they go, which is your question. So they merge into the Brahma Jyoti, or they may, on rare special occasions, be elevated to the Vaikuntha realm. If you like, you probably will like. So I'll send, you remind me, and I'll send to Shankadari some of the statements from Scripture that says, I researched and gathered these things. What's the destination, and the difference between your question, those that are killed by other forms of the Lord and those that are killed by Krishna. Why is it different? What is different and why? There's a special mercy that goes with Krishna.
Right.
And the fullness of that mercy is not accessed by those that are killed by other forms of the Lord. Although they're equal, they're not manifesting the fullness of Krishna's mercy. those killed by Krishna, and even those killed as agents of Krishna, like Arjuna and Bhima and so forth, they achieve liberation. Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, they didn't achieve the same. So, but he'll send you the document, and you can be surprised.
Okay, great.
And scratch your head a little bit with all the detail. But there's detail to all of this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Online anything? And if not, we'll see if what's going on in the room. Nothing online? Anyone in the room? Some comments or question? Okay. Yes?
How can I develop attraction for hearing this again and again and again?
Well, by hearing it again and again. It's a little bit like what we just heard, Maharaj Parikshit. He had, the word is not used, the word that's used is not eagerness. He had some anxiety. He was feeling longing of separation from Krishna. So by hearing, there's purification. And from that purification comes an attraction. And from that attraction comes wanting to hear more and wanting to hear more. So by hearing more, serving more, associating with those that are absorbed in that activity of hearing and chanting, then that becomes your liking also. Naturally. You associate with others and you become like them. That's the principle. Sangat sanjayate, kama. Okay. You're letting me off easy. Okay. Something online? Okay. We're in suspense here. Suspended animation.
This one is from Harsha Prabhu. He says, apart from Prahlad Maharaj, did anyone else visit planet Earth?
Did anyone else visit planet Earth?
I think he means like perform their like pastimes on planet Earth.
Well, yeah, lots of living entities have come to Earth and performed pastimes. It's not exactly that. Perhaps what he means is in Prahlad's prayers, chapter 10 of Canto 7, he says, the Lord sent me. In that sense, maybe Prahlad appeared to perform a pastime. But there are other appearances of Prahlad that's not always sent from Vaikuntha. And so there's some details found in Hari Bhakti Vilas about that. So it's not always even Prahlad is sent from the spiritual world. Sometimes, and otherwise. So the answer is yes. there are persons who come to assist the Lord in his pastimes. Let's take the Vanaras who were assisting Lord Ram in his pastimes, and there was an indication from Vishnu to the demigods, and then Brahma to the demigods, that they should assist Lord Vishnu in his pastimes of killing Ravana and the Rakshasas. So there's an example.